in the programme. Something else we're talking about, wine and champagne are going to be sold by the pint, a Brexit benefit apparently. The Department for Business and Trade says a new 568 millilitre size is going to offer more choice for customers. Is that right? Why this change? Well, Dr. Peter Burke is the chair of the UK Metric Association. He's also a locum GP in Oxfordshire, and I asked him for his response to the arrival of the pint-sized bottle.
Well, I'm very glad you asked that. I mean, the publicity has been very much about this pint-size option, and it is being put out in the pretense somehow this is increasing choice for consumers. First of all, it's complete red herring. That is not the main issue that we should be talking about. But secondly, when the government talked about increasing choice, I think it's a bit like telling people that in the 1970s that they could have the choice of buying in pounds, shillings and old pence as opposed to pounds and new pence. That just wasn't an option. You have to have either one or the other. And increased choice for retailers means less choice for consumers in a sense. So what you're talking about there is giving retailers the choice of marking containers in imperial sizes, which actually are long outdated and not currently lawful for most products. Being able to buy a pint of champagne in a pint size, or it'll actually be labelled 568 millilitres because that is the metric equivalent, and metric still prevails. How many people can benefit from that? You know, in a time of a cost of living crisis when most people can't afford to buy champagne, I think it does say something about how detached from reality ministers are when they think there's something positive. The other thing to say about the size is that 3 new sizes have been introduced by the government, which is the 200 millilitre, the 568 or 1 pint, and the 500 millilitre size. 2 of those are actually metric, not imperial. So the reason I say it's a red herring is because actually what we should be talking about is very much what is the future, what is the direction of travel. People try to link metric units to the EU, but that's a complete fallacy. The British government decided in 1965, long before EU membership, and long before EEC membership for that matter, that it would go metric. And the intention was to introduce metric units within 10 years. And as you know, before and during the period of membership of the EU, it has become normal in supermarkets and elsewhere to sell products in metric. Mm-hmm. In actual fact, you're talking about either weight, length or volume. And the primary indicator is always metric. It is perfectly legal and has been for a long time legal to have a secondary indicator, which is imperial. But the important thing is that people know what the metric equivalent is, and that if it says on a shelf what the amount is per quantity, that quantity should always be metric. So in other words, you'll see a bottle that says, so and so per 100 milliliters, or so and so per 100 grams or kilogram, whatever the size is. That is the way it has to be, and that means you can compare like with like. If you have different units, then you can't make that comparison, and it's actually rogue charter for retailers. Now, there's an exception, which is to say distances on the roads, which are still partly, but not entirely, but partly imperial, and then, of course, pints of doorstep milk, beer and cider. I say that roads are partly imperial because actually when you look at a motorway, look at the markers along the side, the white posts which are marked at every 100 metres and the blue ones which are every 500 metres. That tells you how far along the motorway you've come. So in actual fact we are using metric and even on the roads. And of course, often you'll see, for example, cycling distances measured in metric, and also if you're running, you do a 10k, 5k, 10k, etc. That's all metric. So there are a couple of anomalies, but I mean, imperial is in the past. Quite honestly, I think the important point I want to make is that all of this was prompted by a government consultation, which was published after a long delay, 16 months. They've been sitting on this. They've had 100,000 responses, and only 1.3% of people want more imperial. Everybody else wants either the status quo or just metric. That is the way the public opinion is going, and the government needs to wake up to that.
So what do you think the reasoning behind this is?
Frankly, it won't happen because what manufacturers, bearing in mind champagne is mainly produced abroad and bottled abroad for that matter. What French champagne house is going to produce an extra size, which is only slightly larger than the existing one? Put it this way, if you've got at the moment, you've got the 750, which is standard bottle, you've got the 375, which is half a bottle, and they're bringing in 2 sizes in between, the 500, which is metric, as I said, and the 568, which is a pint, which is just slightly bigger. So why doesn't he want that extra 68 mil? And is that something worth going to battle about? Well, the rationale behind it is quite simply the government has said it wants to throw some red meat to people for whom this kind of thing was important, who are a tiny minority. First of all, people who drink champagne and who are particularly fussed about what quantity of champagne they have in their bottle. And I think most people won't notice. Now, there are two other things to say about that. First of all, it's a license for shrinkflation, because people will think they're buying a bottle of 750 mils and they're getting a bottle of 568, which is smaller. Will they be charged 25% less, which is what logically it should be? Or will there be a markup for this new bottle size, which actually will carry costs and for the manufacturers and so on to produce an extra size bottle? And it won't actually come on stream for quite a long time because there is a latency. So that's one thing. The other thing is that people are saying it's because Churchill liked the pint bottle of champagne. Mm. And, I mean, how out of touch can you be? This is something, Churchill is long gone. He was a man of his time. He actually drank an awful lot more alcohol than we would consider healthy nowadays, and probably even more than most of his friends considered healthy at the time. And he liked to go through a pint of champagne on a daily basis, or so he said. Well, I don't think that's one of the things about Churchill that I'd want to emulate. I think if you're going to copy Churchill, if you're going to use him as a role model, then think about the positive things he did. He was responsible in 1948 for founding the European movement. He was partly responsible, at any rate, for that. He was the person who talked about the United States of Europe. He believed in European countries working together. And I think that part of the message about having this British pint of champagne is about separating ourselves from our neighbours. And that, I think, is highly regrettable in a globalised world.
Do you know all I'm thinking as we talk about this? I'm finding it quite confusing.
Yep.
I really am. And I can imagine that people will just think that. Will just think, well, I'm just confused by the different sizes.
At the moment, we know what we were talking about. All drinks at the moment, apart from, as I say, beer and cider, all alcoholic drinks are sold in metric units. Mm. And the standard bottle size is 750 mils. Nobody knows, what a bottle is. They've seen them on the shelves. They know what they look like. And you can work out a half bottle as well. I can't see any logical reason for introducing lots of other bottle sizes. I can see possibly a case for the 200 mil, because people might not want necessarily to drink. They may be on their own. They may just want a glass of wine, and logically, if you open a bottle of wine, you're going to finish it off, within a reasonable space of time. Otherwise, it goes off. So, 200 mils, you might see some sense in. But why on earth, 568 should be somehow magically better than 500 mils? I don't understand at all.
I think, Dr. Burke, you've said it all. That was really good. Thank you. As I say, I've just come away feeling a little bit confused about why they actually want to do this, if I'm honest with you. But can
I tell you two other things, just for interest?
You can go for it.
Imperial units, as we call them, don't go back into ancient history. They were decided upon in 1824. And in 1862, the British government first started talking about metric in serious terms. And ever since then, they've been on and off about going metric. All of the Commonwealth has gone metric now, with a few exceptions. And the UK is lagging behind. So it isn't just about being European. This is a world standard. And of course, it's used universally in science, medicine, and elsewhere. I mean, I'm a doctor myself, and nobody would ever think about measuring drug quantities in anything other than milligrams or the equivalent. That's one thing. The other thing is that metric is actually a British invention. So John Wilkins in 1668 published a paper where he came up with essentially the basic structure of the metric system. So it's not a question of being somehow unpatriotic if we use metric. Quite the contrary. The weights and measures, or at least the weights used, which we call imperial, are avoir du poids, which is a French word. So there's nothing British about them. Many of them have been used in other countries, but, in other countries they've had more sense, they've got rid of them. And I would strongly argue that we should do the same.
That's Dr. Peter Burke there, who's the chair of the UK Metric Association, as we mull over the plans to sell wine and champagne by the pint. It's 22 minutes past 3 now. We'll take a look at the news headlines at 3:30. First, though, a hedge